Hello, welcome to Issues and Ideas. I'm Kristi DeBello.
Elections is another one of those critical infrastructure responsibilities that I have as well. And I would say that many people believe that it may be one of the most important things that we need to make sure we trust is reliable, and that when it gets to election day that we've been proactive to make sure that we have the right people voting, electing the right leaders to lead this country through the days that we have, knowing that people can trust it.
That was DHS Secretary Kristi Noem from this past week with some rather frightening words. I'll get to why they're frightening in a moment, but first some background. Noem was in Arizona when she said those words. She was there to promote, it's called the SAVE Act, which is federal legislation designed to prevent voter fraud. Now, while we all want legit elections, there has never, let me repeat that, never been an election where the outcome was brought about because of people voting who were not supposed to be voting. No, not even the 2020 presidential election. Let's get away from that now. Have there been people casting illegitimate votes in federal, state, even local elections? Sure. In fact, there have been people charged with voter fraud in several states for acts like taking mail-in ballots from their elderly parents, for example, and casting votes in their name for Trump. Don't believe me? Look it up. Now, regarding the SAVE Act, here's what it calls for. When it comes to voter registration, you'd be required to provide documentary proof of citizenship. It's called DPOC in the legislation to register for the first time, or if you're updating your registration due to things like moving or name change. You get married, for example, or you change gender, for example. I guess we'd have to include that even. Now, acceptable documentation, that would include a U.S. passport, birth certificate, often paired with a photo ID, a naturalization certificate, certain military, tribal IDs, anything that indicates a birthplace or a citizenship status. With in-person registration, the aforementioned DPOC would need to be presented in person at an election office, which people are saying would effectively eliminate the convenience of mail-in online voter registration, obviously. The SAVE Act addresses voter roll maintenance, calling for states to put into place programs to ID and remove non-citizens from the existing voter rolls, often by cross-referencing state data with federal databases from, for example, the Department of Homeland Security, as well as Social Security offices. There's also a national requirement for voters to present a photo ID to cast a ballot in person or even via absentee voting. Now, this bill has passed the House, but it's highly unlikely to pass the Senate. It needs 60 votes to get through there. And that reality is what's compelled Trump to promise that if the SAVE Act, or when the SAVE Act dies, he is going to sign, you've heard this, an executive order mandating voter ID in all the states. Now, it makes me have to repeat myself, which I hate doing, but here we go. Any executive order like Trump is threatening would be completely unconstitutional. Why, you ask, and I'm glad you asked. Let's read Article 1, Section 4, Clause 1, which is affectionately known as the Election Clause. The times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations except as to the places of choosing senators. Now, when it comes to that part about what Congress can do, that was more established with the 15th Amendment. And that reads, the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude, meaning slavery. So that means it's the duty of Congress to make sure that access to voting is not blocked for any U.S. citizen. It has to be more open, not narrowed. Which brings us back to Kristi Noem's words from this past week, which again were,
Elections is another one of those critical infrastructure responsibilities that I have as well. And I would say that many people believe that it may be one of the most important things that we need to make sure we trust is reliable, and that when it gets to election day that we've been proactive to make sure that we have the right people voting, electing the right leaders to lead this country through the days that we have, knowing that people can trust it.
Now keep in mind, we've already seen Tulsi Gabbard, head of national intelligence, oversee the seizure of ballots in the 2020 presidential election down in Georgia, and Noem's DHS wants access to states' voter rolls. Now, we do need to remember, too, that, put it bluntly, Kristi Noem's not that bright. When you add arrogance to ignorance, that creates what we'd like to call a useful idiot. As we've come to learn, Kristi Noem is a card-carrying member of the WWPT Club. That stands for What Would Please Trump Club. And proof of this, of course, is how she almost immediately referred to Renee Nicole Good and Alex Preddy as domestic terrorists before any investigation or her even seeing any video of what happened. But Kristi Noem is a useful idiot thanks to her saying the quiet part out loud. The right people voting, the right people winning. Her words.
Elections is another one of those critical infrastructure responsibilities that I have as well. And I would say that many people believe that it may be one of the most important things that we need to make sure we trust is reliable, and that when it gets to election day that we've been proactive to make sure that we have the right people voting, electing the right leaders to lead this country through the days that we have, knowing that people can trust it.
Noem was asked what voter fraud has been found that creates the need for the SAVE Act. Noem, of course, had no answer because there are no examples. And this creates an important question. Who exactly are the right people? The right people voting and the right people winning. America is a nation which has flourished thanks to free and fair elections. Considering the threats the GOP is facing, especially in Texas, is Donald Trump now endangering that heritage? Is Donald Trump endangering America's heritage of fair and free elections? 24 years ago, let me say that again, 24 years ago, the Boston Globe made the first revelations about the sex scandal, which had existed for decades before then within the Catholic Church. From day one now, of that point, the efforts for justice and fairness was met with one denial and refusal after another. Those who created and pushed those denials and refusals ignored one very important fact, though. The resolve of those wronged will always outlast and overcome every effort designed to deny them justice. That's why today, for the victims, that's become far more just than it has been yesterday. This was recently evidenced by a decision by the Diocese of Camden in New Jersey. My first guest today has been a strong legal advocate for the victims of rape by Catholic priests, and his dedication to justice has played a major role in bringing this day about. He is the founder of the law firm Gianforcaro Law. Gregory Gianforcaro, how are you today, sir?
How are you? Thanks for having me. And It has been a long time. It's been a long, long fight.
Indeed. GianforcaroLaw.com. Learn more about Mr. Gianforcaro's law firm and the work that they do for people, not just for purpose, but for people. That's what makes it. That's the difference that they make. So this has a lot of importance to it for a variety of reasons. Obviously, let's get to what we have to say at this time proposed settlement is, because it still has to be approved by the court. But as we speak, what are we looking at, Greg?
Well, it's $180 million, and it has been a long time coming, but this would, and you are correct, it has to get court approval, but that's basically a done deal because everyone else, including the victims, the creditors committee, the lawyers, both for the diocese and for the survivors, as well as the insurance companies, have all signed off on this. So I think it's just just confirming everything that everybody's agreed to, and I anticipate that that's not going to be a problem.
And this is one of the largest settlements up to this point, at least Los Angeles Roman Catholic Diocese. They had reached $880 million agreement back in 2024. Archdiocese New Orleans in last September agreed to pay $230 million for settlement for the victims that they created through their ignorance of the reality. And as I said a moment ago, Greg, this is important for a variety of reasons because the Camden Diocese, they were hard set against any kind of confession, no pun intended, or making restitution to the victims. They were fighting every single element, as I alluded to in the introduction. What changed? What brought them around to see that this is the right thing to do?
Well, I think one of the issues was they got a new bishop. And I think this bishop came on board. If you recall, the Camden Diocese opposed the grand jury investigation.
Right.
And that was back earlier in the year. And shortly after hearing oral arguments, the bishop, who really just came on board within the past, give or take about less than a year ago, he felt when he learned of this situation, he set aside the arguments and he said, I don't care how the court rules, we will be subject, my diocese, the Camden Diocese, will agree to be subject to and comply with the Attorney General's investigation. So I think that spoke volumes to the commitment and the change of leadership and wanting to try and at least put forth some type of cooperation. And I think that made a lot of difference. Maybe, in fact, it may have made all the difference here.
Is this going to matter, too, in any way, shape, or form, do you think? I mean, it's tough to predict how other separate entities are going to react to the action of one, but there's ongoing litigation with Newark Diocese, Metuchen Diocese. Is this move by Camden going to influence what those two dioceses do? Thinking, well,
I have to believe. Oh, sure.
No, I'm sorry.
In answer to your question, I have to believe it will. I think that because once there's a commitment from the diocese, this just goes to show you that these cases can be settled, that we can reach an agreement, that there could be insurance added to this, but a component where the diocese as well as their insurance companies make a substantial contribution, enough to get these cases settled, I think. And I don't think, like what the Camden Diocese went through, I do not think it requires that they file bankruptcy. I think this is going to be a model for things to come.
With that filing for bankruptcy, the layperson would think, well, that's the diocese trying to avoid any kind of financial responsibility. Is that just in a legal sense a way to protect themselves and to minimize damage? Because I mean, you can agree to pay $1,000, but if you can pay $1 million, it's even better.
It is, and I remember when they filed bankruptcy, it was. I think a lot of the clients felt like, oh, we're going to get nothing. And I said, that's not the case. Bankruptcy does not mean that you're not going to get everything, that you're going to get nothing. There's a process in place. I will say that one of the things that did help was the change in the bankruptcy. I don't want to say the bankruptcy laws, but at least the way bankruptcies were proceeding. And I say that because a lot of I'm sure all your listeners, and I know you guys have done programs on it, the Sackler family with the OxyContin cases, and how the Sackler family tried to benefit from the bankruptcy without paying any money. And the bankruptcy court, and that was the Second Circuit, said, oh no, that's not going to be the way we're going to handle it. If the Sackler family wants to benefit from the bankruptcy, they're going to have to pay a substantial contribution themselves. Now, how does that impact the church, the Catholic Church? Well, in the past, it's been the diocese that has been able to file bankruptcy, and then their subsidiary corporations would benefit. And those subsidiary corporations were the parishes. Once the OxyContin case and the bankrupt that matter changed the landscape, then I think these dioceses had to take another look at whether or not they wanted to file, or whether it was feasible to file bankruptcy, because now it would only benefit the diocese rather than help with the separately incorporated parishes. So I think that kind of freed up a lot of things. But unfortunately with Camden, the insurance companies were able to access a lot of the arguments as the OxyContin case went through the Supreme Court. But the bottom line is, now it's going to be much more difficult for the diocese and their related parishes to file bankruptcy. It's a lot more complex. I think that, and the fact that this Camden diocese has resolved these cases or will have resolved these cases once the plan is approved, I think it shows that there is a means to an end, and that there is a way to resolve these cases. But it's been a long time coming. It really has been.
Oh, sure. And just between, we have to wrap up here, but just between the 2019 signing into law of the New Jersey Victims' Rights Bill, again, that was 2019, the payoff really didn't happen for what's been now almost 6-7 years later. But without that bill becoming law, then the justice that we're finally seeing for these thousands of victims and many more, because I think something like this has a ripple effect across the nation. Every state has dioceses that are culpable in what we see. This isn't exclusive to New Jersey. Find out more about the law firm, Gianforcaro Law. Their website is gianforcarolaw.com. Gregory Gianforcaro, thank you for being a devoted, dedicated, strong advocate for the victims in all this, and the voice that you gave to them. Thanks for being here today.
And thank you for all the work that you do at disclosing it. I think media pressure helps significantly, and I think it helped this situation dramatically, and I appreciate that.
If you're listening via your favorite podcast platform, be sure to subscribe and follow us so you'll never miss a minute. Yes, it is tax season. It's that time of year when you at least hope to get back a nice piece of that money you've given to the government interest-free over the past year. And I know there's been a lot of political speak about taxes, which probably has led you to believe that your refund will be a nice one, a massive one even. Was that an automatic, or is some of that responsibility on you to make that happen? Are you fully aware of the changes, many changes in filing this year? And how about the changes in just getting your refund, if you are one of those? Well, we're going to slow things down a little bit, take a look at this with the help of my next guest. She is a co-partner with the tax firm Prager Metis, where she works out of their Cranberry, New Jersey offices. Robbin Caruso, how are you today, Robbin?
I'm doing great. How are you, Chris?
Well, it's good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here to help people understand the quite a few changes. And when you hear a lot of the politicizing of them, and not every promise ever came to pass, but there are some good things and some things to pay attention to. But let's get to some of the basics. As far as the bare bones of filing and deductions, what are some of the changes with personal deductions? Because I know, for example, seniors 65 and older have a special bonus this year.
Yes, there's a new senior deduction. It's a $6,000 deduction available for eligible taxpayers that have reached the age 65. They need to have a Social Security number. This is good for 2025 all the way through 2028, so it's a temporary provision. And if somebody's married filing joint, they must file married filing joint to avail themselves of this. But the good news is it's available for each qualifying individual. So if you have spouses, they can each take the $6,000 deduction if their modified adjusted gross income is $150,000 married or $75,000 for others.
A lot of people in the service industry, we always hear that significantly with the periodical employment reports, And we've also equally been hearing frequently about no taxes on tips and overtime. Has that come to pass, and to what degree does it affect people who can file with those and focus on those deductions?
Yeah, these are some great new deductions for people who do qualify. The tip deduction is for qualified cash tips, so those are voluntary tips that have been reported on credit cards and tip sharing. They both count also. So anything that could be reported on an information statement, like a W-2 or a 1099, will be helpful. This is for up to $25,000, and again, it's also for 25 through 28. And similarly, if you're married filing joint, you have to file married filing joint. A lot of people don't realize that, so that's why I like to mention that. And again, it's up to $25,000 for both on this one, and the phase-outs begin at $150 for a single person and $300 for married filing joint. We have some issues this year because the employers haven't had time to get up to speed on the reporting that they need to do, so there are special notices and information that the IRS has out and FAQs that you can Google on to get more information, or speak to a taxpayer that's experienced with this. I think people will need some help. For the qualified overtime deduction, that's $12,500, and it's similar to the other, what I've said. The biggest difference with that one is if people misunderstand it, they think all of their overtime pay will count towards that $12,500, but it's only the 1/2 of the 1.5% you got for your overtime that will actually qualify.
So those deductions sound like you really have to make sure they're verifiable, and you need to be careful in detail as much as possible, because it sounds to me like if you are a bit lackadaisical with these deductions, you might get red flagged for an audit. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes, it would definitely be a fair statement. What I always recommend that taxpayers do is gather up all of their tax documents, take a look at what they filed in the prior year, make sure they're filing complete and accurate returns. If you don't have all the information you need, prepare a tax projection and make sure that you file a timely tax extension and pay what you believe you owe, so that you could avoid late filing penalties. They can accumulate up to 25% on you, so that's really rough. So filing a timely return or tax extension is important. And an interesting thing is to add is that not all states conform to federal tax law, so you have to really be careful to understand what's happening in your state, what's going on in New Jersey. We have our own rules. So things like the tips deduction, that's not for New Jersey, that's for federal. The qualified overtime comp, it's not New Jersey. Again, it's federal. So we want to make sure we understand what's happening in our states as well. And when we file an extension and pay, in New Jersey, for instance, you have to pay at least 80% with your extension for that extension to be considered valid by the state. So if you miss filing and paying either the return or the extension in New Jersey, you're going to find yourself with failure to file penalties that start at the April deadline. So very important to file. And then, like I said, filing correctly. You mentioned if you're not filing correctly, you can trigger a tax audit. There are all kinds of penalties that can be assessed for negligence or understatement of income or overstating expenses. So we just want to be careful. We have everything on there. Everything's tied down, and we're not making any mistakes. And if we do, we may get a matching notice. It could be simple, small dollars. Maybe the IRS is right. The biggest thing to do if you get a notice is just read it really carefully. Make sure you understand what you need to do, that you're responding timely, or taking advantage of your appeals rights if necessary. So, again, you may want to speak to a professional if you think you need that kind of assistance. So for higher dollars or more complex issues, I would say contact a qualified tax professional.
Such as you would find with Prager Metis. We are talking with Robbin Caruso, co-partner with the tax firm Prager Metis. She works out of their Cranberry, New Jersey offices. You can find out all their locations and services at pragermetis.com. We have that link at our website. And you are listening to Issues and Ideas. This one, for radio, we're based in New Jersey, but our podcast obviously goes everywhere. The SALT which stands for state and local tax SALT deduction increase. That is going to be certainly a more valuable asset in filing in some states more than others. Again, what's the importance of attention to detail with the SALT tax? With the SALT cap, rather.
With the SALT tax, they're offering a deduction now that used to be $10,000, but now it's up to $40,000, and that'll go through 29. So most taxpayers who itemize their deductions will be able to take higher deductions for all the state and local taxes. So that's our real estate taxes, as well as our income taxes, things such as that. So it's going to be helpful for a lot of people. And I maybe should have mentioned on some of those other deductions for seniors and tips and qualified overtime, etc. Those are good for people who itemize or take the standard deduction. So I think it's helpful to mention that. So either way, you could, if you qualify for them, you don't have to itemize to take them. But to take the higher SALT deduction for state and local taxes, you do need to itemize your deductions.
I was going to ask too, generally speaking, case by case is always going to be just that, but generally speaking, do these changes invite more people to itemize, in your opinion?
I think some people who qualify for the higher SALT deductions will be itemizing this year, where otherwise they might not have been. So anybody paying substantial SALT taxes will find themselves in a better position itemizing. By the time they add that to their charitable contributions and maybe some medical and other things that get added into that, they might be. And then one thing to point out with the state and local tax deduction, that while it was expanded, there also is a phase-out for that. So once somebody hits a modified adjusted gross income of $500,000 or up, that starts to phase down at 30% for each dollar that they're over. And that's important to take into account. And the interesting thing with this particular deduction is that 500 threshold is for all tax filing statuses. Not usually there's out threshold for single versus married filing joint, but not with this one.
As well, too, we have to move along here. I want to get to another topic before we run out of time, but the child tax credit, that's increased. Also, what you can contribute to your 401k, IRA, HSA, that's all increased. You could find that in your tax filing information. But if you do your scorecard and you're going to get something back, Robbin, there's less ways to get it back now, because with the rare exception, if you don't have, you really have to do getting a refund electronically. Now, paper checks are not completely eliminated, but you sort of really have to prove that's the only way you can have it sent to you.
Absolutely. It's a great point. When you file your tax return, you want to ensure that you're including your direct deposit information. If you don't include direct deposit information, the IRS is going to hold up your refund or the processing of that return possibly. They do. I might be mistaken when I say processing, because they're accepting your return. They're not rejecting it. They're just not finalizing the return. They can't take your refund and apply it to next year or do anything else with it until you give this direct deposit information. And so taxpayers may receive a CP53 notice. If you get that, you want to read it carefully and respond right away. You could do that online through a taxpayer online account, which is another great thing to do. Set up an IRS online account. You can make payments. You could check for notices. You can your wage and income reporting so that you can file an accurate return.
So it's always there's always options. And again, like I said back in the introduction, there is some of the responsibility that falls on you as the taxpayer. It's not a totally automatic situation. And if you're one of those unbankable people, that's the official fiscal term, there are some not gift cards, but American Express cards, Visa, MasterCard cards that you can pick up at a Walmart that have a routing number as well as a way to do an electronic deposit on and load those cards through your IRS deposit, believe it or not. Not every one of them. You have to really check and sort through them, but there are ways, even if you are one of those unbankable people, that the checklist refund process that the IRS is encouraging will not be a hindrance to getting whatever refund you're getting back. And if you're looking at everything and saying, well, I have a lot more to do with my taxes this year than I've had in the past, and the attention to detail is really a priority now more than it's been in the past, then you should turn to Prager Metis, because that's what they do. They help you, the taxpayer, make sure that not only do you get the best possible refund this year, but you're tax planning long term, because as Robbin said, some of what is now is going to be a temporary situation. So you'll either have to adjust later or prepare and make that adjustment a lot easier. So find out more about the services, because they might just be a great asset to you that you haven't thought about and maybe are now in need of. PragerMetis.com is their website, and she is a co-partner with the tax firm Prager Metis, working out of the Cranberry, New Jersey offices. They have multiple locations, though. Robbin Caruso, thank you so much for helping us put the priorities into place and getting better aware of what this tax season holds in store for us. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much, and wishing everybody a easy tax season.
Amen to that. I want to give you the heads up. The next No Kings rally is happening nationwide. They're coming up on Saturday, March 28th. You can find out more at nokings.org. That's where they have a map. You can find the event, the rally that's happening near you. And you know what? If there isn't one, you have time to organize your very own. You can find out about how to do that as well at the website for the No Kings rallies, nokings.org. Debt has become a part of everyday life, has it not? Whether it's credit card debt, mortgage debt, medical bill debt, need to manage and bring down your debt is, well, hopefully always one of your personal goals. As we've sadly come to learn, the federal government does not hold a similar goal when it comes to the national debt. The fact that even basic math doesn't provide enough of a catalyst for elected leaders to change their ways adds to this dangerous economic situation. The next guest joins us to look at how we got here, why you should really care about this, and how it needs to be addressed. He's Executive Vice President with American Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold. Thanks for being here today, Brandon.
Thanks so much for having me.
And a website to learn more about this issue and others that the American Taxpayers Union pays attention, provides education on, ntu.org. We have that link at our homepage as well. So give us a current state of affairs when it comes to the national debt, Brandon. What kind of a situation are we in right now, number-wise?
Well, first, are you sitting down? This is not a pretty picture here. Unfortunately, we are out of control when it comes to spending. I think most Americans realize that. Most Americans that don't work that don't work in Congress or live in Washington, D.C., I should say, realize this. Our debt is skyrocketing. I think the headline figure that everyone's seen lately, $39 trillion, a staggering figure when it comes to our national debt, $39 trillion, and climbing. You know, the amazing thing to me is how quickly we've reached this debt crisis that we're facing right now. You know, you look at the national debt over the years. It was 2008, during George W. Bush's presidency, the waning days of his presidency, that we first crossed that threshold into $10 trillion of debt. Now we're poised to quadruple that as we quickly move to $40 trillion of debt. We'll hit it later this year. $40 trillion of debt. We've quadrupled that in less than 20 years. So again, you look at this rapid increase in debt that's fueled by our entitlement programs like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and the fastest growing program, it's not really a program, the fastest growing line item in the federal budget is the interest that we're paying on our debt. We're now paying about $1 trillion a year on our national debt just to finance this rampant spending. That's about the entire economy of Switzerland, a large country, just to finance our debt. That provides no benefit to anybody whatsoever. It's not a health care program, an educational program, or anything. All it does is pay the bills. This problem is out of control, and it's got to stop.
And let's translate this from real life into the federal budget fantasy life that we're looking at right now with the realistic numbers, as painful as they are. Personalists right now, they have their income, their household income, their individual income. They look at that and, okay, how much can I pay on my debt? And you always want the debt to be far less than what your income is going to be. That's not how it holds with the federal government. As you look at how much of the GDP theoretically has to be dedicated now just to paying the debt that you mentioned, never mind paying back on the principal.
Yeah, absolutely. You're looking at the total level of spending as a percentage of our economy, which I think is a really good metric to use. Most people, when they're crafting their household budget, you might spend 25% or so on mortgage, maybe another few percentage points of your monthly income on your auto payment, utilities, which if you live where I do, they're going through the roof, I think, for most of the country. But, you craft this budget. We're at a point now where we are spending about a quarter of our nation's economy, almost a quarter of our nation's economy, just on the federal government, just on spending going to Washington. That doesn't include payments to our state and local governments as well. But a quarter of our budget a quarter of our total economy, I should say, going just toward the federal government. We haven't really experienced levels like this since the 1940s, coming out of the Second World War. There have been some fluctuations, certainly during the financial crisis, 2008, 2009, during the pandemic. We saw a spike in spending, but we're not at war right now. Hopefully we'll stay that way. We're not at war. We're not facing a pandemic. We're not facing a major national crisis unless you consider the debt. So to have elevated spending at this level and projected into perpetuity, essentially, it just simply doesn't make sense. This has been a voluntary choice by our Congress, by our leaders in Washington, to continue to elevate spending and to follow this ratchet approach to spending, where when we have these crises, we increase spending to address them, but then we never revert back to the original levels of spending. We just continue to work off this elevated and ever-climbing baseline that is bankrupting our country effectively.
Just to give you an administration by administration example of what Brandon is describing here, you go back to 2 terms of Bill Clinton. He added, let's average out the numbers, about $1.5 trillion to the national debt. Move forward to George W. Bush, 2 terms, around just about $6 trillion in debt. That's 2 terms. Barack Obama, again, 2 terms. He added roughly $8 trillion to the national debt. 2 terms. If you look at Joe Biden in 1 term and in the first term of Donald Trump, each one of them in 1 term added $8 trillion to the debt. So, Brandon, it seems like, as I said back in the introduction, remedial economics and even remedial math is not really comprehended by any of these individuals, is it?
No, absolutely not. And the finger pointing in Washington is one of the problems here, because everyone says, oh, the Democrats did this, the Republicans did this. What happened was Washington did this, and it doesn't matter what letter is next to your name. Unfortunately, we've got politicians from both parties that have increased spending, that have acted irresponsibly, and it's going to take probably politicians from both parties to clean this up. I think Trump has done a good job on a number of areas, cutting back spending, reducing the size of the federal workforce to its smallest level in decades. I think that's important, part of the solution. I think some of the rescissions, scaling back wasteful spending that we've seen, all sorts of ridiculous programs, growth in the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is fine as an entity, but it shouldn't receive federal dollars. I think all these things are a step in the right direction, but they're just kind of nibbling around the edges, and we need to take bigger steps. The big tax bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill passed last year, I think made some important changes to the Medicaid program, common sense changes like requiring people to work before or seek work before they get federal benefits, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. So I'm hoping this is the start, building that momentum, building that muscle memory for lawmakers to start actually rolling up their sleeves and starting to take a more fiscally responsible approach to the budgeting process each and every year, and to start to turn things around on behalf of taxpayers.
But with that, in regards to that, though, both parties are manipulative in how they want us, the people, to look at that. They say, well, we can't cut military spending, especially now with the world, the shape it's in, everything we're involved with. Social Security, well, that's going to be depleted on its own. We can't touch that. Otherwise, we'll just expedite that financial cliff. Medicare, Medicaid, can't touch that because seniors, veterans, they look at what's considered to be mandatory spending as the only place to look at. And how much of a misconception is that?
Well, it needs to be an all of the above approach, and what you described there, I think, is absolutely on point. Politicians just take their favorite programs off the table. You keep taking all the programs off the table, and then there's nothing left to reform or make cuts to. But the mandatory programs that you mentioned are consuming a larger and larger percentage of our budget. Mandatory programs, for those who aren't budget nerds that are your listeners out there, those are programs like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. That eats up the bulk of our mandatory budget. Mandatory programs are things that Congress doesn't revisit each and every year. They're just kind of on autopilot. And with 3/4 now of our budget on autopilot, all these fights that you see in Washington each and every year, every few months, it seems like these days, over shutdowns. We're not going to fund the federal government. We're actually talking about only about a quarter of the budget when we talk about the Department of Education, Department of Homeland Security, Department of War, Health and Human Services. All these departments are only about a quarter of the budget because all of this other spending is just on autopilot. And we need to put all of that. 100% of the spending needs to be on the table, taking a fine-tooth comb to it, spending items as small as those stupid earmarks that we see pop up, which is $1 million here or there for elephant statues and oyster research and other sorts of nonsensical programs, as well as the structural imbalance. That's really where the additional savings are, the structural imbalances that exist in Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, kind of right-sizing these programs for a modern America that reflects the fact that people are living longer, people are working longer, that we have a mess of spending and inefficiency in these programs, that all sorts of fraudsters and shady entities are abusing these programs to squeeze more dollars out of them. We need to be very, very comprehensive here because otherwise we're looking at a huge national security problem as our debt increases and more debt is held by countries overseas that may not have our best interests in mind.
That's a whole other issue. A bulk of this debt that we're talking about is the term privately held debt. Is that the correct term?
Yes.
And that means, when you're sitting there on your mortgage and you're falling behind, do you want the bank come calling in with the sheriff in tow saying we're calling on the debt, we're calling in the loan, pay up or get out? That's a case you don't want the nation to be in. Just to wrap up with Executive VP of American Taxpayers Union, Arnold, here on Issues and Ideas, why should the person right now listening care? Because, that's $39 trillion. I'll be long gone before the problem's ever going to come about, and I got my Social Security, or I already know, or they're accepting or dismissing that their favorite program, the one they thought they were going to rely on, especially someone younger in their 30s and 40s, well, that's not going to be there. So why should that person care about this?
Yeah, I love that question, Chris. I think that's really, really important thing for people to think about. These aren't just numbers on a page in a ledger book in Washington, D.C. You see this increased spending actually push up things like mortgage rates, higher interest rates caused because markets are flooded by government debt way more than they ought to be. You see it pushing up things like inflation. If we could reduce inflation by reducing spending and getting our budget under balance. And then you look at programs, you mentioned Social Security. Social Security is going to go bankrupt. The trust fund is going to be depleted in about 6 years now. So people that are running for the United States Senate this November, they're going to face, if projections hold, at the end of their term, this depletion date for Social Security, at which point we're looking at benefit cuts to the tune of 25, 30% for Social Security recipients, or you need to have massive tax increases or transfers from other programs, higher debt, in order to make sure that seniors are getting the checks that they're relying upon. This is an enormous crisis, but it's a slow-moving crisis, and it will affect retirees, it will affect families, small businesses. Across the board, it's going to affect us, let alone our future generations. Of course, we want to hand off this country's finances in better shape than we receive it to our kids and grandkids and so forth.
And certainly, if you're financially drowning, you don't want to pour more red ink into the pool and just further the amount of people who are going to drown that much faster. And I want to give you the website again, ntu.org, for the American Taxpayers Union, because they also did a survey that showed, thankfully, a lot of American citizens realize who's to blame on all this. It's not an, oh, well, what are you going to do type of attitude, or, oh, well, we really can't do anything about it attitude. People see what the cause of the problem is, what the effect of the issue has become, and that might be one of the major catalysts, too, for why we are going to see whatever the results wind up being coming up this November in the midterms. Again, you can find that and more at ntu.org, the website for the American Taxpayers Union. He is our Executive Vice President, Brandon Arnold. Brandon, thanks for the insights and the, ability to understand why this is so painful and at the same time the importance of understanding why this needs to be addressed. Thanks for being here today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
For over a week after the Bad Bunny halftime performance at the Super Bowl, we had people saying with absolute certainty that the FCC would fine everybody, Bad Bunny, NBC, the NFL, the hot dog vendors, for allowing that performance to take place. Their claim was that Bad Bunny was singing obscene lyrics involving everything from degrading women to forcing kids to watch adults have sex with farm animals. The magical figure these people came up with for the fine was $10 million. This past week, the FCC made their decision. They declared, nothing to see here, move along. Then, of course, the FCC went back to harassing Stephen Colbert, but I digress. Same people who made the claims, by the way, of obscenity by Bad Bunny in the next breath admitted that they didn't even know Spanish. They were relying on memes that they saw and shared on social media. They whined about how, if you can't understand what's being sung, it shouldn't really be done in America. Really? Now, if lyrics are the root of music, the foundation of music, then explain to me how and why classical music, jazz, big band music came to be and exist very well to this day. While the Bible has many teachings about how singing is used to give praise to the Lord, music on its own, that's used as well. Jesus even has this admonishment in Matthew chapter 11, verse 17 for the people that I'm referring to. We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We mourned to you, and you did not lament. Is our musical praise required to have words with the music that we play? Not according to Psalm chapter 33, verse 2. Praise the Lord with the harp. Make melody to him with an instrument of 10 strings. Now, there's a very serious issue behind what I've just talked about. These people want to separate rather than unite us as a nation. Oh, they want to build groups and coalitions, believing that when they join together in what they consider a righteous cause, that Jesus will stand with them. But they even claim Jesus says so in the Bible. Now, while the idea is found in God's Word, you need to qualify for the Word to take action. The Word doesn't qualify every action that's taken by you. Here's what Jesus does declare, though, in Matthew chapter 18, verse 20. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there in the midst of them. I can't speak with certainty whether the number of people seeking to divide us has increased, or we're just seeing more come out of Satan's darkness feeling empowered for some reason. But when you look at recent demands and orders from people like Donald Trump, well, the latter seems a lot more likely. Most recently, we've seen Donald Trump do things like order pride flags removed, including from the Stonewall National Monument in New York City, where the modern-day LGBTQ plus movement was born. Trump's also ordered references to slavery in museums, other government-run locations to be removed. Recently, here on Issues and Ideas, I shared with you how Trump considered the Civil Rights Act to be reverse discrimination against whites. Paul in Romans chapter 16, verses 17 and 18 warns us about those who seek to divide. Now I urge you, brethren, note those who cause divisions and offenses contrary to the doctrine which you learned, and avoid them. For those who are such do not serve our Lord Jesus Christ, but their own belly, and by smooth words and flattering speech deceive the hearts of the simple. For those who are seeking purity, let's call it, in our society as they clutch the Bibles close to them, believing that God is with them in their mission, let me take you back to the Old Testament in the book of Numbers, reading from chapter 12 and starting with verse 1. Then Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. That's right. Moses was in an interracial marriage. Moving on to verse 2 now. So they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? And the Lord heard it. Yes, the Lord did hear Aaron and Miriam, and no, he was not happy with them. Not at all. As you read further, God says to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, hey, three of you, we need to talk. Now, if you were Aaron or Miriam, would you be all excited? Oh, boy, God's going to take my side. God's going to go with me instead of Moses. Yay, me. Well, here's what God says to Aaron and Miriam. Let's start with verse 6 of Numbers chapter 12. Then God said, hear now my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak to him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. I speak with him face to face, even plainly and not in dark sayings, and he sees the form of the Lord. Why then will you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? So the anger of the Lord was aroused against them, and he departed. After that, God hit Miriam with leprosy. That in turn brought grief to Aaron. Now here's the lesson for us as Christians. What did Moses do? He didn't cheer about this. He didn't celebrate. Moses prayed to God for him to forgive Aaron and Miriam since they expressed repentance for what they did. And yes, God did forgive and restore Aaron and Miriam. To be a child of Christ, we are to show and share our love for all, at all times, without any bias or favor. This is what Paul tells us in Romans chapter 2, verse 11, for there is no partiality with God. And we also learn this in James chapter 2, verse 9, but if you show partiality, you commit sin and are convicted by the law as transgressors. We also have this in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 15, you shall do no injustice in judgment, you shall not be partial to the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty. The word all is found in the Bible over 5,200 times. We are to love all, pray for all, forgive all, help all, care for all. The Word of God isn't a menu that we pick what we like from. It's a buffet of love and wisdom from Him that we are to share with, say it with me, all. Now, if you're having a tough time understanding the meaning and importance of what I've shared with you here today, spend some time studying Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. That is where a lawyer who thought he was all that tried to test Jesus about the truth of the Word, and Jesus reveals a story about the Good Samaritan. There was a man who took pity on and helped a man despite their respective heritages, calling on them to hate each other. What was true then, when spoken by Jesus, is just as true today. Be sure to check out our website, issuesandideasradio.com. That's where you'll find more information about the guests who are here on the show with us today. And if you're listening via the podcast platforms, don't forget to subscribe or follow so you'll never miss a moment. We're always grateful and thankful for your time and attention. Look forward to being with you right here this time next week for our next edition of Issues and Ideas.